morning, everyone. So last week we were in 1 Corinthians 13 and we talked about what biblical love is and what biblical love does, and we made the point that biblical love is more than feelings. We said that love creates feelings and it generates feel-good emotions, but love is first of all an action. In 1 John 3:18 it says, "Little children, let us stop saying we love people. Let us really love them and show it by our actions." Jesus told a story to illustrate love in action, and it is one of the most famous stories in Jesus' life. It's called the Good Samaritan. Now, the Bible doesn't call him good. We added the good. The Bible just calls him the Samaritan, but we call him the Good Samaritan. You know why? Because he was good. That's right. And throughout the United States and the world, there are hundreds of hospitals and charitable organizations that have the name Samaritan in it. Now, there's a couple of things I want to share with you before we get into the story. Now, my goal is for us to find the broader principles that apply to us beyond the first century culture. I'm not really interested in who the priests were, who the Levites were, who the Samaritans were, as much as I am interested in what is Jesus teaching us today. What are the principles that transcend the first century? Now, I don't know if this story really happened or not. Probably not. Probably it's a parable, although Luke does not actually call it a parable. But the Samaritan story raises a lot of questions, and sometimes we talk about the Samaritan and then we don't really deal with the practical aspects of it. But is this story teaching that you have a responsibility to pick up every hitchhiker along Highway 90 between here and New Orleans? You decided to go to Louisiana on the scenic route. Is this story teaching that as Christians, we are obligated to stop and to offer help to everyone who's standing at the exit or the entrance of I-10 or I-65? Is this story teaching that you, as a Christian woman who is traveling down the road alone, is obligated to stop and offer help to the guy standing next to his car with his hood up? And how do we balance all of that with 2 Thessalonians 3:10 that says if a person doesn't work, neither should they eat? So it's clear we're not obligated to help everyone. There is a guy on TV by the name of, this is my brand new earpiece here, so we're just getting it to, looks like it's, yeah, I had that little thing that went over the top. You remember that? I looked like a captain of a Delta flight or something. But there's a guy on TV by the name of John Stossel. And he has a TV program called Stossel Reports. And a few years ago, in 2013, the producers of the show, along with John Stossel, they wanted to determine how many people were legit. Because like you, what about these homeless people you see who are apparently healthy and that they don't have any means of making a living or have any money? And what about the people along the roads? And so they went to these people and offered them jobs. And they were real jobs, and offered to pick them up at the place where they were at a certain time. How many do you think ended up? 0. That's how many. Which goes to show most people want something for nothing. Now, in the end, You will have to be the judge of your own particular situation. If you are in the habit of picking up hitchhikers, I'm not suggesting that you do anything different. If you are not in the habit of picking up hitchhikers, I'm not suggesting that you change anything. That's not the point of this lesson. The point is, what are the principles that apply to us when we know there is a legitimate need? Now, the story of the Good Samaritan was given to answer a question asked by a lawyer: who is my neighbor? And this answers that question. Now, I'll give the answer to you very quickly. My neighbor is the person who is least likely to be loved by me or my society. So, three men, a priest, a Levite, and a Samaritan, are traveling the 17 miles from Jerusalem to Jericho or Jericho to Jerusalem. It was a dangerous road. It was known as the highway of thieves and the trail of robbers. Each man, the priest, the Levite, and the Samaritan, came to the same crime scene. A crime has been committed. A man has been assaulted, been beaten, his goods have been taken from him, and he has been left half dead. Each man interprets the scene differently, and the three choices they made represent the three choices or attitudes that we make toward people in need, particularly those who are in pain. So attitude number one was the priest. So far, Stephen, I don't know. I may go back to that head thing. This thing's going around here, and it's going around up there, and it's coming, it's tickling my neck. You know what I'm going to do with it? Watch that. Well, let's see here. I'm just going to put it right here. You can hear me, right? I mean, you can complain a lot about things that I say that you don't like, but everybody hears me. That's probably why they complain about things I don't like. If I was quiet, no one was sure what he said. So attitude number one is the priest, and we're going to call this the lifestyle of avoidance. A man going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, 17 miles, when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes and money, beat him up, and left him half dead beside the road. So a crime has been committed. This is a crime scene. By chance, a priest came along, but when he saw the man lying there, he walked on by on the other side. This is the attitude that says, I can never get close to people because they might ask you for help. Keep all of your relationships superficial and shallow, because the less you know, the less you have to be involved. And the less you are involved, the less chance of you getting hurt. And that may be true. This is the lifestyle of avoidance. Attitude number two, represented by the Levite, is curious but not concerned. Curious but not concerned. And just for the record, this guy did not sell Levi jeans. He was not a Levi jeans salesman. I'm not even sure they had Levi jeans. Probably not. I think they were invented in San Francisco in the 1850s for the miners and the settlers out west. In the same way, a Levite also came there, went over and looked at the man, and then walked on by on the other side. So sometimes there are situations where someone is hurting and you're curious but not really interested. You're curious but not interested in being involved, curious but not really wanting to be responsible. And it's easy to be curious about someone's misfortune. We like to know what happened, How did they get hurt? Why did the relationship break up? Curious, but not really wanting to get involved. And then attitude number 3, represented by the Good Samaritan, is treat others how I want to be treated. But a Samaritan who was traveling that way came upon the man, and when he saw him, his heart was filled with pity. So this guy is practicing what Jesus taught in the Sermon on the Mount, the golden rule, Matthew 7:12, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now there are 4 ways that we can imitate the Samaritan's actions. So we're going to call these Samaritan principles. So Samaritan principle number 1 is biblical love begins with the eyes. Watch this. Biblical love begins with the eyes. Luke 10:33. Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw, watch it, saw the man, you see that's underlined? When he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. Now, all 3 men, the Samaritan, the priest, and the Levite, saw a need. They saw the guy with their physical eyes, but each one interpreted the crime scene differently and acted accordingly. So sometimes we see a need, but maybe we don't respond because we're too busy. We have other things going on. We don't want to be distracted by world events or personal circumstances to the point that we lose our sensitivity toward other people. Now, being sensitive to others is easier for some Christians than it is for others, because some of you were born with, this is it, some of you were born with a sensitivity antenna. You know what this is? That's your sensitivity antenna. And it's nothing for you. You see people in need right off. You know why? Because you have one of the 3 gifts mentioned in the Bible, the gift of helping, the gift of service, the gift of hospitality. And listen, I believe all of us are obligated to be helpful and serving and caring for other people and hospitable. But some of you have the gift to be able to do it. Other people are easily distracted and have to make an extra effort and ask God to help them see people's needs so that they can respond in an appropriate need. So not everybody has the what? What is this? The sensitivity antenna. So this is Galatians 6:8. This is from the Message paraphrase. I chose this just because I like the word weeds. The person who plants selfishness, ignoring the needs of others, harvests a crop of weeds. All he'll have to show for his life is weeds. Here's 1 Corinthians 10:24. Don't think only of your own good. Think of other Christians and what is best for them. So we don't want to purposely ignore legitimate needs around us. Now I'm using the term legitimate needs. You'll have to define what is a legitimate need. I'm sure that if you were a person on London Bridge yesterday and there were 7 people killed, 45 or more people were injured when some radicals ran them over and started stabbing people, I have no doubt you would have been on the ground helping somebody to the best of your ability. You were there and police officers were coming. You would have helped. So what we're talking about is how we respond to legitimate needs. And Samaritan principle number 1 is love begins with the eyes. Samaritan principle number 2 is feel compassion for other people's pain. Feel compassion for other people's pain. This is verse 33. When he, the Samaritan, saw the man, he felt compassion for him. So it's not enough to see a need. Our emotions have to be activated to the point that we try to meet the need. And how do we do that? How do we develop the emotions and the sensitivity so that we can fulfill the passage in Romans 12 that says, weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. And by the way, it's a whole lot easier to weep with those who weep than it is to rejoice with those who rejoice. It's a lot easier to weep with people in their misfortune than it is to celebrate their new job where they're making $50,000 a year more than you. You develop compassion by learning to listen. We develop compassion by learning to listen. In fact, love is sometimes listening. And giving advice to somebody who is hurting can actually be counterproductive to biblical love. Because some people want to come in and give you all kinds of advice. And you're lying there, and you're like, and you say, well, I know why that happened, and Jesus loves you, and, whoa, yeah, it's just what I need. So I have a quote on your outline. This is from Joseph Bailey. He died in 1986. He wrote a book, has an unusual title. You can get it on Kindle for $8. The title of his book is The View from a Hearse. He had 7 children. 3 of his children died in childhood. And so he's using this view from the hearse as a metaphor to mean that he knows what it is to experience burying a child. He buried 3 of his children. He was fairly well known. He wrote a regular column for Eternity magazine. So this is what he said. I was sitting, torn by grief, and somebody came along and talked to me about God's dealings, of why it happened, of hope beyond the grave. He talked constantly. He said things I knew were true, but I was unmoved except to wish that he would go away. And he finally did. Then another person came and sat beside me and didn't talk at all. He didn't ask me any leading questions. He just sat beside me for an hour or more, listened when I said something, answered briefly, prayed simply, and left. I was moved. I was comforted. I hated to see him go. And so listening is a form of love because it meets 2 basic needs. Number 1, the need to be understood. And number 2, the need to have your feelings validated. You don't feel like you're crazy or abnormal. In Galatians 6:2 it says, share each other's troubles and problems, and in this way obey the law of Christ. I didn't know Jesus had a law. What is the law of Christ? I certainly want to obey the law of Christ, don't you? It's what we commonly call the great commandment. Love God with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. In the same way it comforts you when someone listens, you comfort other people when you listen to them. And so we develop compassion by learning to listen, and you don't always have to be giving advice. Samaritan principle number 3 is do what you can at the moment. Do what you can at the moment. So verse 34, it says, kneeling beside him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with medicine and bandaged them. Now there's a lot of nonverbal communication going on here, and I'm sure Jesus intended for that since he's telling this story. Several things I picked out. Number 1, he got down on his level. He got down on his level. It says he was kneeling beside him. So here's this guy injured, and the Samaritan's down on his level. Number 2, he did not pretend like he was superior. I am better than you are. 3, he did not make the guy feel stupid. Well, what were you walking down this road for at this hour of the day alone? And 4, he used what he had to help the guy, including his bandages and his donkey. And listen, nothing said transportation in the first century better than a donkey. I love in the King James Version, in the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, I love it. It says that this person lit off their camel. Lit off their camel. Isn't that the craziest phrase? I guess lit in Old English used to mean to dismount or to get off. I'm thinking of, hey, pass the camels over here.
Oh, God.
Proverbs 3:27. It says, never... Oh, by the way, I chose a combination of the Message and the Good News because there's a phrase in here that I really like and I had to pull from both versions. Never walk away from someone who deserves help. Watch this. Watch this. Your hand is God's hand for that person. Isn't that interesting? Because haven't we heard that old saying, you are the only hands that God has, you are the only eyes that God has, you are the only feet that God has, you're the only mouth that God has. Well, this says, your hand is God's hand for that person. Never tell your neighbors to wait until tomorrow if you can help them now. So the world is full of a lot of wounded people. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, financially. And they need your kindness in the moment of their distress. So do what you can at the moment. Here's a couple of lessons from the Good Samaritan. I call them profound lessons. Maybe that's a little bit of a stretch. But 2 lessons from the Good Samaritan. Number 1 is be willing to be interrupted. Have you noticed that opportunities to show love don't usually happen on a schedule? Right. So think of the excuses that the Samaritan could have given. It's not my fault the guy is in the ditch. Did I put him in the ditch? No, I did not put him in the ditch. I have limited financial help. I don't have a lot of money. I have to be in Jerusalem or Jericho by the end of the day. I have a business. And, the guy is probably dead. Anytime we need an excuse for not loving, I promise the devil will be there to give us one. This is Luke 10:31. It says, by chance a priest. I find that to be interesting. This is being written by Luke, we believe, under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. We call the book of Luke an inspired book. But I find the phraseology very interesting. By chance a priest. What seemed like a chance encounter was actually a God-directed encounter. Because what you think is merely a coincidence could be God putting somebody in your path. Why? So that you can minister to them, and who knows, maybe they'll be open to the Word of God. And then 2 is be willing to move past your fears and prejudices. Samaritans hated Jews. Jews hated Samaritans. Samaritans were half Jew, half Assyrian. So they weren't liked by either group, and they didn't like anybody either. But take a look at the fears that the Samaritan may have had. What if this guy was a decoy? They did that kind of thing. They'd have some guy by a rock ledge, and they'd have like ketchup on him. Sir, could you help me, please? Please, I need help. I'm early. And you're walking along. You love these illustrations. You're walking along, you're going down to Jericho or Jerusalem, and you see this guy over here, and you go over there to help, and the three guys jump up, beat you up, and they take your wallet, and they're gone, man. That kind of stuff happens. It still happens. It just happens in different form. A few years ago, for several years in South Florida, they had a rash of these crimes where people would be at a stop sign or a stoplight, and you would feel somebody hit your bumper. Somebody would hit your bumper. And what are you going to do if somebody hits your bumper? Well, you get out. And so the people would get out, and then the people from that car that hit them would jump them and rob them. And so they began suggesting, depending on where you were in South Florida, in Miami, that if you get bumped, you may not want to stop. You may want to just keep rolling and just suck it up with the bumper. So, they're doing decoys like that. What if he rejects my help? And what if while I'm taking care of him, he dies? Today, we might wonder, or we might think, what if this person sues me? Right? I read a story about a person who was resuscitated and then sued the person who resuscitated them. Now, some states have what are called Samaritan laws. Other states don't, and the states that don't, you can be liable if somebody dies while you're giving them care. Now, fortunately in Alabama we have a Samaritan rule or a Samaritan law. This is from the Alabama Code, section 65332, subparagraph G. If you are rendering emergency care at a scene of an accident and you're not being compensated for it, you shall not be liable for any civil damages as a result of any act or omission by the person in rendering emergency care. In other words, if you're trying to resuscitate somebody along the road and you're not experiencing resuscitation and they die, you're not going to be held liable for civil damages. But not all states have a Samaritan clause. Jews and Samaritans were divided by race, religion, and politics. But the Samaritan did not let his fears or his prejudices stop him from helping a fellow human being. And you wouldn't either. And you haven't in the cases that you help. You will help anybody regardless of their background. That's a legitimate person to help, as determined by you. Then Samaritan principle number 4. I didn't know how to put this one. We're going to call it compassion is costly. And I came up with a sentence that rhymes. Are you ready for the sentence that rhymes? There's always a price to being nice. And being nice is going to cost you a whole lot more than not being nice, because compassion is costly. So, verse 34, then he put the man on his own donkey, took him to an inn, where he took care of him. The next day, he handed the innkeeper 2 pieces of silver. Did I leave in that little thing I put in the brackets for myself? All right, I forgot to take it out. But maybe $500. The commentators were divided. So, maybe $500. So, if this incident happens in Orange Beach, your $500 will probably put them up for one night, maybe. But maybe if you can get them up to Robertsdale, you could probably get a few more nights for your $500 than on Orange Beach. So he gives him 2 pieces of silver, $700, and told him to take care of the man. If his bill runs higher than that, he said, I'll pay the difference the next time I am here. Now, what did the Samaritan get out of this? Are you ready for this? Nothing. You see, biblical love is when you do something not expecting anything in return. Here's Isaiah 58. 10, it says this: if you feed those who are hungry and take care of the needs of those who are troubled, then your light will shine in the darkness, and you will be bright like sunshine at noon. You know what this is? I was reading this and I'm thinking, this is the Old Testament equivalent to what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount. You are the light of the world. You are a city set on a hill. If you look at the statements that Jesus made in the Sermon on the Mount, a lot of it was not new. A lot of it has Old Testament equivalents. Proverbs 11:17 says, your own soul is nourished when you are kind. So there's a lot of things that we can do that help others, that are legitimate. A week ago or 2 weeks ago, some of you gave blood. We had the blood mobile out here. That's great. You can give blood. It's a wonderful thing. We have the Promise Keepers, where we put up several families for a week. The classrooms become bedrooms, and you have helped with that, and all that's legitimate because these people are part of a program and they're working to better themselves, and that's what we believe people ought to do. You know of people at work who need some kind of help or encouragement. A lot of things that we can do. You can help with children's church or a ministry around here. There are a lot. Listen, if we were just fulfilling the legitimate needs that we know about, we will be keeping busy. So here's Galatians 6:10. It says, when we have the opportunity to help anyone, we should do it. But we should give special attention to those who are in the family of believers. So we want to give attention to everyone, but especially to those who are a part of our family. Our finances are limited, as all church finances. Everybody's finances are limited. So it has to be determined by the leadership where it's going. And so we want to focus first on those who are members of our congregation. It's just like with your own family. You'll help a lot of people, but you're going to help your own family first. And rightfully so, because 1 Timothy 5 says if you don't help your own family, you're worse than a non-believer. So yes, we have an interest in all people. As a congregation, we're first going to focus on those of our number who need something from us. And you as an individual, you can determine what situations you are going to help in. So I'd like to close with a prayer. And the prayer is at the bottom of the outline, or on the last page of the outline. I don't know if it's on the bottom or not, but it's the last thing. And this, we'll read this. I'll read it, and you can follow along. And then Stephen's going to come up and lead us in an invitation hymn. Father, I want to thank you for showing me love. You sent Jesus to die for me, and I'm grateful for that. I don't want to be a cruel or an unconcerned person when it comes to the needs of other people. I really want to be more loving. Help me to take these 4 steps toward biblical love today. Help me to start seeing and sensing the needs of people around me. Give me spiritual radar. Help me to be a better listener so I can sympathize with people. When people interrupt my life, help me to see opportunities to grow in the demonstration of love. Help me to be willing to take risks and move against my fears and prejudices in order to help others. Starting today, I am making myself available to be used by you and show your kindness and love to others. In Jesus' name, amen. Stephen is going to lead us in our invitation hymn. And if you have a particular need, please let us know what it is while we stand and sing.